Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, folks. Just to remind you, my name is Tim Sullivan, and I represent the state along with my co-counsel, Attorney Henry. Jordan Lamonde is guilty of second-degree assault. He is guilty because on June 12th of 2017, he acted with extreme indifference to the value of Erin McCarthy's life. He acted with extreme indifference when he punched her in the head roughly 40 times, when he punched her in the face and head, kneed her twice directly in the face, and threw her to the ground. The defendant unleashed this vicious attack to send a message. The message not to Erin, but to Erin's boyfriend, Stephen Bunch. The defendant attacked Erin because he believed that Stephen Bunch had stolen $30,000 from him. And over that 6-month period, his obsession grew, became obsessed with revenge. It escalated until finally, on June 12th of 2017, it boiled over, manifesting itself into a bizarre plan of waiting outside Erin McCarthy's place of employment, waiting for 8 hours. He sat in the parking lot and waited for 8 hours. So let's talk about what happened on that June 12th night. At 10:02 p.m. on June 12th, Erin McCarthy was finishing up her shift at Planet Fitness. Erin's 19 years old, and she had just worked from 2 to 10 p.m. She was tired. She was looking forward to going home and just relaxing. Erin had no idea what was about to happen. Erin didn't see the target that was on her back. And Erin didn't know the defendant was prepared to send a message to her boyfriend, Stephen Bunch. Erin didn't know that the defendant was lurking in his car, waiting to attack her. And as Erin walked out of her car, walked to her car, the defendant walked towards her. He made it appear like he was just going to walk into the gym, and he walked right by her. He was strategic. He wasn't going to launch this attack from in front, where Erin might have a chance to defend herself. No, he waited until she had her guard down, until she was the most vulnerable. He was wearing glasses and a hat in an attempt to disguise himself. And as Erin walked by, the defendant turned direction. He came up behind her, and he launched his attack. What happened next was violent, it was dangerous, it was such extreme behavior that it risked Erin's life. Erin was defenseless from what came next, a complete sucker punch. And as the defendant approached her, he gained momentum, shuffling his feet, while he unleashed a right hook directly to the side of her head, right to her temple, putting his entire weight behind him. A blow designed for one thing, to knock her out. But where this happened, Erin was standing on pavement, and she was right between two vehicles. Erin's head snapped to the left from the force of the blow, but somehow Erin was able to stay on her feet, managed to stay on her feet, as the defendant unleashed a fury of punches. Left, right, roughly 20 punches. Every single punch directed at the same area, her head and her face, beating on her. Erin was stunned. She cries out to this person, "Why? Why are you doing this to me? Who are you?" A presumed stranger. She has no idea who this is. She goes into shock, goes into survival mode, and just keeps putting her hands up, trying to block, trying to do anything she can to stop this vicious assault. And after repeatedly using his fist, the defendant takes her and throws her over his shoulder, smashing her onto the ground. But he didn't stop. Erin's on the ground, doesn't stop. This is his moment. This is his revenge, his opportunity to send a message. So what does he do? The adult male gets on top of her. One hand holding her down, the other hand. Punch, punch, punch. Throwing punches, hitting her again. Right in the head, right in the face. Defenseless, full punches. The assault continues. Erin struggles. She does the best she can to put her hands up and try to block this. And somehow, she's able to stagger to her knees. She gets to her knees, and her face is now directly in line with the defendant's knee. So what did he do? While he's holding her, boom. Knees are right to the face. Still holding her, she comes back. Boom. Knees her again, right to the face. Still holding her, her momentum brings her forward. Boom, a left uppercut, right to her face. And after that strike, again, to the place she's most vulnerable, her body getting tossed around like a rag doll, the defendant continues his barrage, more punches, a fury of haymakers, until he finally throws her to the ground and he flees out of the parking lot. This attack, occurring over a 30-second period, what may sound like a short period of time, plenty of opportunity to send his message and get his revenge. 30 seconds of pent-up fury, which resulted in roughly 40 punches being thrown, 2 knees to the face, Erin thrown to the ground on 2 separate occasions. But despite the viciousness of the attack, Erin survives. Despite the extreme risk of the conduct the defendant engaged in, Erin was able to get up and run for help. Now you may be asking yourself, how is the state able to give you such a vivid description of what happened? Describe it, punch for punch, knee for knee. The entire assault was captured on video. Planet Fitness has a camera pointing outside the building. It captures every painful second, every punch, every act of violence. There is no dispute that this happened to Erin on June 12th. So now we know that this happened. And the next logical question is, why? Why did this happen to Erin McCarthy? Why was she the target of the defendant's wrath? The answer? Because of the conduct of Stephen Bunch 6 months earlier. Now, folks, it's common that the state can't give you a motive, can't tell you a reason for a crime. We don't have to. Can't get inside someone's head. But in this case, we know exactly why. What the defendant's motive was on June 12th, a warped sense of revenge for himself and to send a message to Stephen Bunch by attacking his girlfriend. Because the defendant believed sometime in December of 2016 that Stephen Bunch was involved in the theft of a safe from the defendant's house, which had roughly $30,000 in it. So I want to go back now and talk a little bit about December of 2016. The defendant had a safe in his room, and inside the safe was a significant amount of money. According to people the defendant told, it was roughly $30,000. And one night in December of 2016, that safe, it gets stolen. Now we're not here to determine who stole the defendant's money or to resolve that case. But we are here because of the actions the defendant took in response to that theft. The safe and the missing money became his obsession. He wanted his money back, or he wanted revenge. He wanted to send a message. So how do we know that this was something he became obsessed with? Well, during that time, the defendant was working at Home Depot. His boss was Joseph Zaremba. You're going to get a chance to meet Joe, and he's going to tell you how during this time, a month and a half leading up to after the safe was stolen, the defendant was obsessed with it. He could not, would not let it go. Joe tried to mentor him, tried to say, just let this go. You can't fixate on it. But the defendant said it was a lot of money, and he wasn't going to let it go. Constantly talking about it, constantly talking about how upset he was. Now he was going to get to the bottom of it. This went on for weeks. Joe finally sat him down. Did you have to let this go? And he refused. And sometime in late January, early February, that Joe has to let the defendant go from his job at Home Depot. He just can't let this go. In addition to Joe, you're going to meet Savannah Ellis. Savannah Ellis went to high school with the defendant. And during that time, Savannah started dating someone by the name of Eric Bunn. And Eric and the defendant were best friends. So Savannah says they all start hanging out together. They spend about 3 days a week for a few years together. And in December of 2016, the defendant tells her the same thing. My safe was stolen. But he believed at that time that it was Joe Bunch, who was Stephen Bunch's brother, that was involved in the assault. The theft. So now we know the defendant's obsession, we know his motive, but why does Aaron McCarthy become the target of this vicious attack? In the early winter and spring of 2014, Erin McCarthy broke up with her boyfriend. She started dating Stephen Bunch. They started dating around March or April of 2017, 3 to 4 months after the safe had allegedly been stolen. Erin McCarthy is a 19-year-old Farmington resident. She lives with her parents, and she works at Planet Fitness. Erin had no idea that Stephen Bunch had this target on his back, and that she now had a target on her back, simply by association. Erin was unaware that the defendant and Stephen had bad blood. She'd never met the defendant, never heard of him, had no idea who he was, had no idea what Stephen had done prior to dating her, or what he was involved in. Now I want to go back to that June 12th day, a day that started like any other for Erin, but it ended as a day that she will never forget. Erin had gone into her shift around 2 p.m., like she always did. She worked until 10. But what Erin didn't know, on June 12th, the defendant pulled into that Planet Fitness parking lot at roughly 2:19 p.m., 19 minutes after Erin had arrived for work. What does the defendant do for the next 8 hours? He sits and he waits for 8 hours. And while cars are moving along in that parking lot, he continues to move his car closer and closer to Erin's car. And when Erin walked out of Planet Fitness at 10:02, her shift complete, ready to go home for the night, you will see the defendant delivered his message to Stephen Bunch. He got his revenge by attacking his 19-year-old unsuspecting girlfriend in a dark parking lot from behind. This attack sent the message, you don't steal from me, this is what happens. So after the defendant had pushed Erin to the ground, the assault is over, flees the parking lot. Erin is fueled by adrenaline. She gets up, she runs into Planet Fitness, she calls for help. Rochester police officers Marvin and Porfido arrive, along with Josh Gagnon, who's a paramedic at Frisbee Memorial Hospital. You're going to meet Officer Marvin and paramedic Josh Gagnon. They ask Erin, who did this? No idea. He's never seen this guy. Josh Gagnon treats Erin for her injuries. She had a welt on the back of her head, a black eye, cuts on her hand. Mr. Gagnon recommends that she goes to the hospital out of concern for head injuries, possible trauma. And Erin did go to Frisbee Memorial Hospital. She was treated and ultimately released. Erin was lucky. The risk associated with this attack could have left her unconscious, seriously injured, or worse. But this case is not about whether Erin's injuries were serious. It's about the risk associated with the conduct of the defendant, the blatant disregard for Erin's life. So now the police are on the scene and there is no suspect. So they begin an investigation into the identity of who this individual is. And one of the things they do is post a small clip on the internet, hoping someone might recognize this man. And who recognizes the man? Savannah Ellis. She knew right away. She could tell by his walk, tell by the car. She knew it was the defendant. So she called the police. She told the police what she knew. and two sergeants, Detective Burke and Sergeant Emerson, they go to the defendant's house. When they arrive, they see him sitting in the driver's seat of a gray Ford Fusion with the same license plate number as the video, license plate number as the car in the video. The license plate, which is registered to the defendant's grandmother, Roxanne Lamonde, her gray Ford Fusion. They spoke with the defendant. He denied committing the assault, denied her going to Rochester, and even tried to provide an alibi, which turned out to be false. Now, typically, you would hear more evidence about how the police identified the man on the video as Jordan Lamonde. But you don't need to, because one of the things you're going to hear is that the defendant has stipulated, meaning he agrees, that he is in fact the man on the video. No question, that is him. So we talked about this in voir dire a little bit. If he agrees it's him, why are we here? I want to talk about the charge. Because just because he says that it is him on the video, it doesn't stop the analysis. The state must prove all of the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And the elements of the crime of second-degree assault, there are three of them. Recklessly, causes bodily injury to Aaron McCarthy, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. What does that mean? The judge is going to give you the law that you've sworn oath to apply, and what that law means is that the defendant's acts demonstrate a blatant disregard for the risk to the victim's life. It is not necessary that the injuries themselves be life-threatening. This charge is a recognition of the risk to the victim's life based on the conduct, not the result. Just because Aaron was able to escape this beating with some bruising and cuts doesn't diminish the risk associated with the behavior. Defense counsel spent some time talking about this in voir dire as well, how this might be overcharged. Jordan's behavior doesn't rise to the level of second-degree assault. And there are misdemeanors that are charged as well that are known as alternative charges. And what that means is at the end of this case, if you believe the defendant or the state hasn't proved that he acted with extreme indifference, then you can and you should consider the misdemeanor. I want to be clear about one thing. All roughly 40 punches, each knee to the face, the throws to the ground, each one of those is a simple assault. But when you put all of those punches, the knees, the throws, all together, and you look at the blatant disregard for the risk of Aaron's life associated with the defendant's conduct, the state has appropriately charged the defendant because the evidence will establish the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. You will see the initial sucker punch right to the right side of her face, unprotected, defenseless, the knockout punch. That one punch alone, the location, the force, will demonstrate a blatant disregard for her life. You will see her head snap from the force of the punch. The countless blows that follow, one after another, all at her head and her face. The slamming of her body to the ground, the knees, all of the attack directed at her head and face. Our most vulnerable spot on our body. And I anticipate the defendant will focus on the lack of injuries to Aaron. Don't be confused or misled by that. It is not the result of the conduct, it is the risk associated with it. 8 hours. The defendant sat in his car for 8 hours waiting to send a message and to get his revenge. He spent 30 seconds delivering that violent message. It was roughly 40 simple assaults, 2 knees, 2 throws to the ground, and when you put all that conduct together, it equals a blatant disregard for life. And at the end of this case, after you have the opportunity to meet Aaron, watch the video, see his violent act, hear from Joe, hear from Savannah, explain why the defendant attacked Aaron, I will come before you talk about that evidence, and ask you to find the defendant guilty of second-degree assault. Thank you, folks.